Hello, everyone. I'm David Sparks, and welcome to the Mac Power Users. I'm joined today, as always, by Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Good. I've been looking forward to the show. We put it on the books the day that the Vision Pro released. We let's wait several months and let's do a Vision Pro check-in. And I thought, this is the day, man. Let's talk about how we're doing with the Vision Pro. We've got lots to talk about in terms of hardware, interface, software. We have opinions. We've been using it since launch. And this is a great time to do the show as it's getting ready to release in other countries than the US. So I thought today's the day. But before we get started on more power users today, which is the ad-free extended version of our show, it's summer, and I thought it'd be a good time to check in on travel tech. I'm actually heading out of town tomorrow, hooray, for a family vacation. So I'm going to be packing my travel tech and maybe get some advice from Steven, and that'll be a fun discussion just today.
It just travel tech always equals discussion about batteries. That's where it always ends up.
Yeah, batteries, cool bags.
Yeah.
I bought something new for this trip. I'm anxious to talk to you about it and see what you think. So there's stuff to talk about. So yeah, we're going to be doing that today on More Power Users. But the focus of today's show is this thing that Apple made that you strap on your head, and it's the new interface, right? The new thing, which Apple released with much fanfare and then a whisper. I guess maybe we even start there. Isn't it kind of a strange launch that this thing has gone through?
It really is. You know, going into it, I think a lot of folks, including myself, kind of expected a trajectory like the Apple Watch, right? But it's been a lot quieter than that. And I think, you know, being US only is part of that. I think obviously the cost is a huge part of it. And I think as we get into it, spatial computing is just really different than anything we've had before. And it's figuring itself out. But
yeah.
But at the same time, you know, that we're fewer than 6 months into it. And so it's also premature to make any sort of grand sweeping comments, I think, like, is it a failure or not? But it is unusual and definitely different and a bit cooler and slower than Apple's other recent platform releases.
Yeah. When it first released, people were saying, well, they released a beta. They didn't release a finalized product. And having used it, I will just say at the beginning, that is not true, in my opinion. This is very much finalized hardware and software, or we're on version 2. I think it's more where they are figuring out what it's for. And that is the part that I think needs to be covered. But let's start with the hardware. Before it released, everybody said, oh, the weight's going to be a problem. It's heavier than the competitors, and this is going to be a big deal, and people are not going to want to wear this thing a long time. How is that going for you?
I've really struggled with the comfort at first. I don't know what it is, but I seem to be sensitive to, like, I don't know how to say this other than just say it, like pressure on my head. So like tight hats or like tight sunglasses, like a lot of things kind of bug me in that arena. And
it's your brain, man. It's pulsing and always coming up with new ideas. I think it's the Hackett brain.
It's what happens when you cram too much information about performance in your brain. It starts coming out.
You can't wear hats afterwards. Yeah, no. That's a natural conclusion.
That's right. One thing that has drastically changed the comfort level for me is a product called the Solo Top. And it is, I mean, it's like this clip that some people are making on Etsy, and it lets you use basically 2 of the solo knit bands instead of just one. So you're also on the hook for another pretty expensive band. And it kind of turns the Vision Pro into a beanie or like a toque or something, you know, like a knit hat. But it has totally changed the game for me in terms of comfort. And it definitely looks ridiculous, but I kind of think the whole thing looks a little ridiculous. So I just went for it, and that has really made it much more comfortable for me for longer sessions.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I did it too. So The way it works is just a little plastic clip, and it puts a set of mounting points for a second solo knit to go across the top of your head. And when you kind of rig the whole thing up, you got two dials. You got one dial to adjust the pressure to the back and one to adjust the pressure to the top. So you've got the X and the Y axis, each on its own separate dial. And I agree, it is a massive improvement. And it's better than the double strap that comes with it.
Yeah.
It's better than just one solo where you've got to use pressure pulling the thing against your face to hold it on. And it changes the game. Like I watch a lot of movies and stuff on this thing, and since I got this solo top, it's just been no problem. And it does sound silly to buy another strap, but hey, you're already in for a Vision Pro. It's another $100, you know.
Yeah.
I agree. So the weight is a problem. Not that you and I have gone to this kind of extreme solution. We weren't able to use the built-in strap. But that being said, when I wear it, the weight doesn't feel like a problem to me. I work in the thing multiple times a week. I watch movies in it, and I don't really think about it much. But that is with the caveat that I bought this weird strap thing, you know.
Yeah. In the demos at WWDC in 2023, they had a strap that never made it to public, where it was the big, wide knit band around the back, and it had a narrow strap across the top. And a lot of people who experienced that demo spoke highly of that setup, and that didn't come to pass. But I, like you, find the double strap that comes in the box. This is a bit too fiddly and too narrow. Like, it doesn't spread the weight out. Maybe that's why Apple didn't end up releasing it. But what I have learned over the years, especially in the era of 3D printing, and I don't know if the Solo Top thing is 3D printed. It doesn't look like it. But there are solutions to every problem, no matter how specific the problem may be.
Yeah. And this Solo Top thing makes it, like I said earlier, you've got a dial for each direction. And to me,
it's great.
That's the thing. Like with the double strap, trying to get it exactly in the right location by adjusting straps, and then it just never seemed to work very well. And I'm all in on the Solo Top as well. Battery length. That's another thing people were worried about when it came out. I'll go first on this one. It's not been a problem for me. I don't normally strap it on long enough to kill a battery. I did watch the second Dune movie in it recently on battery, and I happened to just watch it in a room that I didn't have a USB-C cable close. So I said, well, let's just see how this goes. And I started getting the warnings like you're running out of battery, but I made it to the end of the movie. So there you go. It's good for one Dune 2 viewing. And that's about it, really. 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever that movie was. I got through it okay. What I do generally is when I'm not using it, I disconnect the battery and I keep it charged. So then whenever I want to go, I can just turn it on. It's got a full charge in it. And battery has not been an issue for me with it, but I don't use it more than 2 or 3 hours at a time. And the desk that I do productive work on it has a USB-C cable or a charging cable. So often I just plug the battery in when I'm at the desk.
Yeah, it feels like they sort of optimize for a movie, right? And that's great. Because I wouldn't want that battery to be bigger. Like it's
I agree.
It's about as big as I would want it to be now. But yeah, most of the time when I'm using it, I'm either at my desk or I've got a couch in my office, and it's not a big deal if I need to have the battery plugged in. Like, the battery's nice. It's nice that I can, not have to be tethered to power. But in my uses, power is always available if I need it anyway. And even on an airplane, right? Most airplane seats now have power at them, or you can bring a battery bank and plug it in. Yeah. So it's not great. I mean, yes, it'd be awesome if it were longer, but in practice, I agree with you. It hasn't actually been that big of a deal for me because I generally have power, accessible to me one way or another.
Yeah. And then there's some workflows I do on it that actually require me to stand up and move around. And I'll get to those during the show. But I will say for those, I thread it down through my shirt and into my pocket.
Yeah.
So I don't have the cable moving around if I'm standing up on it.
You don't want that thing to get caught and
Yeah.
and rip it off your face.
Yeah. So that, because you do kind of forget about it if you start moving around with it on. And we've all done the thing with the old AirPods where a door handle rips them out of your ear or something,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a little more extreme and a little more heartbreaking if it rips your off your face. So yeah, I thread it through the shirt down or sweater, and then I put it down in the pocket, and that's good. What about the overall build quality? Now we've had them a while, we've been using them. How are they holding up?
I feel like mine's been fine. I mean, I was definitely concerned about some of the fabrics kind of looking dirty or worn, right? Like we all have watch bands, right, that used to be one color and are now kind of gross and maybe need a trip to the toothbrush. But I feel like overall the fabrics have held up really well. I definitely kind of live in fear that it's this very expensive curved glass object, but I've tried to be very careful with it, and so far so good.
Yeah, me too. I'm pretty careful with the whole thing, and I keep the cover on the outside. On your advice, I bought the inside cover to cover the lenses when I'm not using it, so they don't get dusty or anything. And I have a bespoke case and all that. I ended up getting the Waterfield case, as you do.
Yeah.
It's like half the size of
Uh-huh.
the Apple case, and I think about the same or less money, and it's just really nice. And I'm pretty careful with it. Like one of the questions I was going to ask you is, have you traveled with it yet?
I have not. I did not take it to WWDC. That's really the only traveling I've done since the thing came out in February. I do have a workcation coming up at the end of the month. I'm going to take a couple of days and go do some focused time away from the pod cabin, and I think I'm going to take it to that because in the evenings, I'm spending 2 nights away for like entertainment stuff, and so that actually
Yeah.
may be my first time I travel with it. And but other than that, it has stayed in the office. Now I did spring for the expensive Apple case, but that thing is so much my aesthetic because I think we
Yeah,
talked
sure.
about it when it came out. Like it's
Yeah.
a thing that people could have taken to the moon in the late '60s, right? The case is ridiculous and too big for what it is and too expensive for what it is, but I love the aesthetic.
Did you put a NASA sticker on it yet? I feel like that is almost like necessary.
I should maybe like a patch. Get my wife to put a patch on it for me.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, and you've got to rough it up a little bit, like it has actually been to the
Oh,
moon.
yeah. It's one of those things where wear and tear is not a bad thing.
Well, okay. So I haven't traveled with it either, and I've actually taken several flights. I'm taking one tomorrow, and I know that's a big use case for Apple, but I can't imagine myself putting one of those on an airplane, and that's just me being a little self conscious, I think. But also, just like when I'm on an airplane, at most I'll use an iPad, or at best I'll take a nap. So I just don't do a lot of tech on planes anyway. And when I get to the hotel room, the trips I've taken haven't been ones where I thought I would want to strap this thing on at night. I haven't been traveling alone. Maybe if I traveled alone, that'd be more useful. The Max Market Labs has been very informative for me on this. There's a lot of people who bought them who travel for work, and they love them. They love that they've got a movie theater. They love that they've got an extended laptop screen. And so there is definitely a case for it, but just personally, it hasn't really kind of called out to me as a travel device.
Yeah, same. I think part of that is the size and the weight. Like if I'm traveling, that thing, even in the Waterfield case, which does look really
Yeah.
nice, it's still kind of a big, bulky thing. And at least when I travel, usually I'm trying to sort of like what's the piece of tech I can take that gets the most number of things done. And so I normally travel with my MacBook Pro, and some trips I'll leave the iPad behind because the
Yeah.
MacBook Pro can kind of do everything. Um, but yeah, it hasn't really clicked for me for travel. I know people who have traveled with it. We got friends who have who have traveled with it and speak really highly of it. I was on the lookout to WWDC and back on the planes. Like, am I going to see somebody with one? So I've never seen one in the wild other than
Yeah.
my own. But I know they're out there. People talk about it. I know people were excited that Vision OS 2 is going to include train support, so your windows don't fly by when you leave the station. But
that's kind of funny. Yeah.
What a goofy, like not goofy, but like what a unique computer science problem. I was like, oh no, my windows went down the track.
There was that famous Casey Neistat video because he's a big Vision Pro proponent, and he was on the subway in New York and he set up his window and he's all happy, and the train left and you just saw it fly down the aisleway of the train as the train pulled away. I'm like, oh yeah, that could be a problem.
Yeah, that was a very funny moment in that video. But for me, it's a device that lives in my studio, and that's fine.
Yeah. So the hardware is going to get better. It's going to get lighter. The battery's going to get longer. Probably the battery will get eventually incorporated into the device. All that stuff is going to get better over time. But I always felt like the interface with the version 1 product is really defining the rules going forward. I mean, even though we've come a long way since the iPhone 1, a lot of the interface stuff in iPhone 1 is still used every day. So let's talk about that. How is the interface holding up? This is another 1.0 interface designed by Apple. One of the things I love about Apple is they usually do a very good job of this. How would you grade them on Vision OS?
I feel like the fundamentals, like how you move things and interact with things, that's all solid. Really, my frustration with the interface itself is I feel like I spend a lot of time managing it. Spend a lot of time like I want this here, I want this there. If I come back later, I got to kind of rebuild my system. And to a degree, that's true of every OS. Like if you log into the Mac and you don't have that setting to relaunch Windows, you're starting with a blank canvas. But on the Mac, there's lots of affordances to make that faster. And I don't know. I feel like I spend a lot of time sort of managing, like tending to the garden, if you will, of the interface on the Vision Pro.
Like setting up your windows is fiddly, and like getting them in the right place because you're managing them in 3-dimensional space. So it's not only X and Y, but there's a Z. Like how close to you are you going to make it? And you're right. Like if you do repeated work, it's always frustrating that you have to go. I can't tell you how many times I've set up, the whisper memos and the drafts memo and the drafts, window and all the stuff I do when I want to write on this thing. And it would be nice if I could like save a setup and just have it rebuild it with some sort of macro or something.
Yeah.
But it is version 1. I wanted to talk about the eye plus tapping because, that was the big revolutionary change here. Most of these headsets up until now have had things you hold in your hand and you point like a fake laser in space at a target and you pull a trigger. You've got to have things you hold on to. They've got to have batteries. Everything's got to work just right. And those work good for things like games. But the idea Apple had was, what if you didn't have to have that? Just like, the original iPhone, the big thing was you don't need a stylus. Here, you don't need the little controls in your hands. And I feel like that is the right idea, but I don't think it's 100% there yet now, having used this thing for months. I still have times where I find it difficult to tap a target, where I'm like moving my head slightly and, just, it's frustrating when you look at a thing, but for whatever reason, the eye alignment is just a centimeter to the left of the target, So then you start playing this trick where you look to the right of the target and then tap your finger in order to hit it. It doesn't happen all the time, but I feel like this needs to be perfect. And it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of that. I feel like sometimes it feels effortless, and other times it feels like I'm. Maybe you've done the thing where like you're trying to get your partner's attention at a party, and you're like staring at the back of their head. You're like, "Hey, hey, it's me. Let's go home."
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm doing that with the Vision OS interface, and I can't quite put my finger on exactly when that happens or why it happens. But while it is good, it is not as effortless as I think they want it to be.
Well, I find myself like looking at a button and it's not lighting up. And then I try to make myself look at it like harder. I don't know how else to put it, And then eventually I can get it to light up if I get my head adjusted just right. I mean, and this isn't every interaction with it. I use it, like I said, multiple times a week. It's fine. But occasionally I hit that. And I feel like that's something that needs to be further worked on. They haven't quite got that nailed down. I still think they've got the right idea. I like the fact that I don't have to track down the little controllers and make sure they have batteries and all that stuff. But I think that this needs additional tuning. Other things that are annoying is app organization, which is getting better with version 2, but still needs work. The iPad apps, they make a big deal about saying, plus there's 1.8 gazillion iPad apps that all work on it too. I think that should come with an asterisk because of the problem I said earlier. iPad apps generally have smaller touch targets than the Vision OS apps. And as a result, your eyes, it has to track your eye on an even smaller target. And sometimes that just doesn't work.
Yeah, that is definitely true. The iPad apps work much better if you have a trackpad, or I guess in Vision OS 2 a mouse if you have a cursor. But all those targets are just too close together for the eye tracking to work. I know initially Slack was really bad. It seems better now. I don't know if that's changes on the Vision OS side or the Slack side or what. I can't imagine they updated their iPad app to work better on the Vision Pro, but that can be a bit frustrating, and that's my recommendation. If you are using this and you have a lot of those compatibility iPad apps around, having a trackpad paired to it makes all the difference.
Yeah, drafts was the same way. Initially, it was really difficult, and it got easier. I'm sure Greg did something to tune it, but yeah, that's it's early days, and I feel like there's certainly more work to be done here. And I have just started using 2.0. So in terms of the eye tracking, it has been better, I think, but I don't want to say that for certain because it's just too early in the process. Maybe it's just I'm having a good run. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my eyes are particularly attentive. I don't know.
There you go.
All right. So what about productivity? Are you doing any productive work with this thing?
So my overall use case for the Vision Pro has been really a lot less time than I anticipated it being. If it's time to like sit down and be productive, I'm not really reaching for it. I'm much more reaching for it for like communication or something really specific. I'm not kind of going into Vision OS to write a blog post or like handle a bunch of email or things like that.
Yeah. Fair. I went into it knowing that I wanted to use it to create a writing space, and that was the first kind of productive setup I did in it, and has been by far the most useful. And that's just part of me now. Like I do writing as Max Sparky often for one thing or another. And I've really got into the habit now of doing it in my leather comfy chair in my studio, not at my production Mac anymore. The Vision Pro has become a writing machine for me. And I really like it. So the setup for me is I have an Apple keyboard and a trackpad combo. I bought a plastic case off Amazon. I know that there's a nicer one, but I just got the cheap one and it's fine. But I put that in my lap and I sit there with the Vision Pro on and I go into Yosemite Valley. That's the environment that I decided early to be kind of the writing environment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful. I mean, I love Yosemite. It's as a Californian, I'm very proud that is in our state. I've been there many times. It's just, if you ever get a chance to go to Yosemite Valley, you should go. I'll say that, even without a Vision Pro strapped to your head, maybe particularly without one strapped to your head. But it's just really well done. And so it's a happy place for me. I go there. And then I use just a combination of applications depending on what I'm writing. Sometimes I'll have research with Safari. I always have a writing screen, and that has varied for me. At beginning, I was using Apple Notes, but I don't like the way it renders that much in Vision Pro. It's Runestone looks much better. It's more of a friendly writing app for Vision Pro, and it's more native. And so I highly recommend Runestone. Drafts is getting there, and Drafts is generally where I like to write. I'm kind of surprised that the usual suspects like IA Writer and Drafts and some of these others haven't got to a Vision Pro native version yet, because I feel like I'm just waiting for some of these better writing apps to show up in native applications. I think that also kind of foretells the sales. This thing hasn't sold like hotcakes, so people aren't in a big hurry to put their apps on it. But I have a writing app up, sometimes a research app, always a keyboard and trackpad in my lap, and I just start writing, and I lose track of time in there. It really is a context shift, so I can get serious work done without really thinking about it. The lack of a display of battery and time is a feature, not a bug. And I go in there all the time. I usually set an alarm when I go in just to remind me when to stop. But I think that this is an absolute workflow this thing is good for in version 1. And if you do a lot of writing and you like to put yourself in a different space, it's worth considering. Now, is it worth buying one of these things just for this? Probably not. But I guess it depends how much money you have. But but it really is. It really is genuinely nice, and I do feel like that I am able to focus on the words. And where I'm on the Mac is where I do a lot of video production stuff. My brain goes into different gears when I sit in front of this Mac, and the Vision Pro does the job for me.
Yeah, I think we talked about this early on, but the Vision Pro, in a lot of ways, especially with the environments, is kind of the ultimate contextual computing device, right? I mean, you said it. You chose Yosemite to be the place where you go write, and now when you are in that environment, that's what your brain like that's the mode that your brain goes into. And I think that's very powerful, right? And I think that's one reason the environments where you can kind of turn the dial and your office turns into someplace else. I think that's one reason that's so such a important part of this product, and I think really an effective one.
Yeah, agreed. And it's why they need to make more environments, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about that later in the show, but that there is kind of there hasn't been enough new stuff since the thing released across the board. But that is my primary productivity kind of action in it. Another one I do is what I call thinking. There's a MindNote app. There's Freeform. And like a lot of times when I'm just thinking about something I want to work on and I want to make like kind of a visual outline with these tools, again, going into the matrix, it makes it easier. So I find that quite useful for stuff like that. It does Freeform really requires you to have an iPad as well, which is kind of sad because, you spent all this money on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't figured out a way for you to write in Air yet.
Yeah. There was kind of a wacky rumor a while back that Apple was experimenting with Apple Pencil and Vision Pro together. And at first blush, that's a bit weird, but I actually kind of think there could be something to that for use cases like this.
Yeah, because using your finger is no good on like a freeform field. And what I do is I just mirror, like I keep Freeform open on iPad and Vision at the same time. And the pass through video is good enough that I can see the iPad and I'll write on the iPad and it live updates basically on my wall as I do that. And it's a very kind of strange workflow. I think that it's a little oddball, but it gives me a wall size idea board in essence. And I like that. It's not perfect. Like if I had a wall of glass, that would be better than this.
Mm-hmm.
but a wall of glass is something most people don't have because it takes a wall. Whereas this thing, you can take it off your head and stick it in a drawer, and then the wall is no longer there.
Yeah.
I feel like this needs work, but I feel like in the future this will get there. And I like using it at the beginning to kind of figure it out, and that's kind of my jam is doing stuff like this. But I do feel like this is something people will be doing with this type of technology going forward. And then you had mentioned like that you don't do email and tasks management and stuff in it. Neither do I. I mean, there are some apps there for it. I will call out a couple. I think Fantastical did a bang up job of showing up on Vision Pro on day one.
Definitely.
It's better than the calendar app. The calendar, I believe, is not a native app, if memory serves. It's just an iPad app. And I do sometimes actually open Fantastical to week or monthly view. And my go-to spot for Fantastical is the ceiling. And, it's just if I need to see upcoming appointments, I just look at the ceiling and I've got like a massive calendar on my ceiling. It's kind of weird, but it's fun. On tasks, I want to call out OmniFocus and Things as showing up as native apps. Very early in the process. Apple reminders. What about you? That wasn't that kind of shocking with version 2. They didn't say, "Oh, and all the rest of the Apple apps are on it." They didn't say that.
It is truly mind blowing.
Email is okay, but fiddly, I find, and like managing my tasks and calendars and email, that is something much easier done on a Mac at this point. It's just you could do it. Apple has made videos about it and shown you how you can set it up, but I don't think it is as convenient as doing it on a Mac.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that there one day could be a world where this platform is better at those things. But I think just like in the list of priorities in sort of the designing the fundamentals, that's not what this is about. Vision Pro is about creativity and collaboration and content, and not so much, okay, I'm going to sit down and like plow through some GTD,
Yeah. One I use that is a native iPad app is Whisper Memos. Actually, I think it's a native iPhone app that has iPad compatibility, which then finds its way onto Vision Pro. It's really taken the long route. And I've talked about this app before. There's a bunch of Whisper-based transcription tools. Like I think Mac Whisper is excellent for taking an audio file and getting a transcript out of it. But this is one where you just talk and then it transcribes for you. And I feel like, I paid for the app, so it has active development attached to it, and the developer is very responsive. A couple things he's added to it over the last several months that I really love is one, he put a drafts mail drop. Well, he put an email forward in it is what he did. So whenever you finish dictating, it'll email the text to wherever you want it. But I put my drafts mail drop address into it. So anything I dictate into Whisper Memos just shows up in drafts as a draft, which is kind of perfect for me. And then most recently, I haven't talked about this in the show yet because it's a newer feature, but he added custom words. So Max Barkey disappeared and Max Sparky, came back for anything I do in Whisper Memos, which is great. So I use that in Vision Pro all the time. I need to write that guy and tell him, hey man, put it together. How much work is there? Just put it for Vision Pro for us. But yeah, so a lot of times when I write, I'll start with a rough draft that I dictate, and then that'll show up in drafts, and then I'll kind of go get working in Yosemite Valley.
Yeah, that's a cool workflow. And there, for the frustration or sort of usage issues that some of the iPad apps bring, like it is a great relief valve for the whole platform, right? If this platform were just stuck with the native Vision OS apps, it would not be a very rich ecosystem. And I think there's lots of reasons developers haven't moved that direction yet. Sales numbers being US only, being so expensive, like all those things are kind of wrapped up in one. And that will change over time. But for now, I think Apple knew that this could be a slow roll. And so having iPad apps there, even if they're not super ideal, it does allow for things that this device just would not be able to do otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about productivity. Let's talk about media. What do you think about watching media on your Vision Pro?
It's really good.
Yeah.
It looks great. It sounds great. I really think this is kind of the best use case for a Vision Pro for most people.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, stuff looks, it's like, look, I've never had a super expensive home theater system. I don't have the room for it. I've never had the money for it. But this feels like I've got one. Assuming I watched it alone. Like you can't share the experience with somebody, but living with some nice ladies in my house, but people who aren't necessarily interested in a World War II bomber cruise and some of the other TV shows I watch. They're amazing in there. It really is immersive. I've never used anything except the built-in audio. It sounds great.
Yeah.
But man, you get in that big theater experience in there and you feel like you're in the theater.
Yeah. The different modes of video watching are really interesting. So you can go into an actual theater. And it's like I just saw Inside Out 2 with the family, sitting dead center in the theater, which is the best proper seat. Why do people want to sit in the front row? I don't understand.
Yeah.
You can manage
they hate
that.
their necks.
Yeah, it kills me. And then there's also a lot of sort of other immersive things. Or you can just have a standard video player, floating above the beach or above the desert or, in one of the environments on the moon. So
or in Tatooine.
Yeah. And Disney Plus. Yeah. So there's a lot of options there, a lot of different types of experiences you can have. And I think in terms of media watching, I would like to see more exploration there. Like having it just as big as you can get it and the sound incredible, like that's awesome. But I think Disney Plus in particular has shown you can build environments that sort of match the media in really like unique and interesting ways.
Yeah. Although that's a complaint too, because the environments aren't shareable.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like that should be almost like a donation system. If you build an environment in your app that the system can use it elsewhere, I can't imagine there'd be a technical limitation on that. And maybe I want to watch something in, Apple TV Plus on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I want to sit there and type into drafts on Tatooine. So, yeah, I just feel like that's a missed opportunity.
I think so too. And I would like to see that change. Who knows? But overall, like the building blocks are there, right? Like these video platforms, services are beginning to experiment with it, and that is exciting.
Yeah, and it's just awesome watching a movie, even a movie not made for Vision Pro, just a standard 2D or 3D movie. They look beautiful in there, and you get lost in them, and it's a better movie watching experience than I've ever had in my home. To me, there's no doubt of that. I thought it'd be fun to talk about some of our favorite content. Have you gone down the immersive content rabbit hole? The soccer, the guys now. The most recent one is the guys doing the parkour in Paris. Have you gone through that stuff?
Yeah, I've seen everything that Apple has put out, and I think the quality is mixed. I think in particular the soccer/football one didn't really take advantage of what the Vision Pro could do. Like the way that it was edited was sort of strange, but I think the first one Apple did, and then the parkour one are much better experiences. The parkour one's a little intense in places, honestly.
Yeah, no, it made me really uncomfortable, some of it.
Yeah. And I hope that Apple does more of that. Like part of this conversation is Apple has to lead the way in some of this content stuff, and they just haven't done a lot of it yet. Like I really was expecting before it launched, like TV Plus to have immersive experiences, right? Like why can't I watch Ted Lasso like I'm sitting in the stadium, right? Why can't I watch For All Mankind as if I'm in the Jamestown moon base? Like, and maybe that will come, but I do think Apple needs to shepherd these other services through this. Like, hey, these are some of the things you can do. And I think what's there is really interesting, but there's just not, it's kind of thin. There's just not a lot of it right now.
Yeah, like when we started the episode, we talked about like concerns that people had from the beginning. Like, is it too heavy? Is the battery going to last long enough? What we didn't see coming was that there'd be a content problem. I mean, I just felt like Apple probably had, you know, content stacked for this thing. And when you see the demo video in the store, you can see all the different stuff they'd already shot. And I expected a whole video, on some of these little quick blurbs we got. And I expected them soon. And that's just not happening. I feel like the dribbling content is probably the biggest problem on the platform to me. Like immersive video is great, but we've only had really two,
Yeah.
and it's been out for what, 5-6 months now. So why not more? And like the sports stuff looks really good, but it looks like they've just barely implemented it. I don't know. I just don't understand how they're not using some of their money to buy their way into like big star concerts. Well, how come there's not like one Taylor Swift song?
Yeah.
Where they ran the immersive video cameras on stage. I'm sure that money could have changed hands and that could have been made. Right?
Yeah.
And I also think the same thing for sports. Like in the demo, they've got this great shot from basically the umpire position on first base. The guy hits the ball, the shortstop catches it and just fires this rocket into the first baseman. And I've never felt the reality of the big league baseball, even though I'm not a huge sportsman. I've never felt the reality of how fast that ball comes in from the shortstop until I watched it in Vision Pro. But that's it. There hasn't been a single lick of baseball content other than that 15-second bit in the thing where they sell it to you. And like, I just don't understand. I just don't understand how that's the case. And I mean, they've known they were going to sell this thing. So the deal should have been being made years ago. And there should have been like like when you go to an airport in the morning and you see all the planes stacked up on the runways waiting to take off, and then they just start going. I felt like that's what we were going to get. And instead we just didn't get it.
Yeah. It is definitely a mystery. And you're right. This is it's easy to spend Tim Cook's money. It's one of our favorite things to do. But like money solves content problems, at least a lot of them.
Well, I mean, I do think that if you want to sell a lot of these things, and maybe that's the thing, maybe they don't want to sell a lot of these things. Maybe they can't even make a lot of these things. I keep forgetting that, but these displays are not easy to make. But like if you really had like deals with some of these big sports teams where people could watch their team the way we see that baseball thing, people would easily find the money to buy this headset if their team was on that regularly.
Yeah.
Same thing with their favorite pop stars. But it just, maybe the problem is that they can't make them fast enough, so they're not as worried about selling them. But the side effect is that those of us that did buy it are disappointed.
Yeah, it's a real, I don't know what the downside of the chicken and egg problem is, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. And I can tell you, as someone who, consumes a lot of sports content, like it would be sick if I could watch my teams playing, playing in this thing and in 3D immersive content, or have things around the games. And maybe the game's not that, but maybe there's like ESPN does the 30 for 30 and all this great content, and the stuff's just not there. And I, on one hand, I understand that getting old content or live content is maybe more difficult than things moving forward. But then it comes back to the thing of like, well, Apple knew this was coming. Why aren't they leading the way, right? Maybe partners are going to be slower. Apple should be out in front. And it's all very confusing to me in some ways. And part of me even thinks like, well, does Apple not want this to be media first. And so they're holding that back, hoping it's a more general purpose computer. But at some point, you've got to listen to what your users are saying. And I think, and people who have these that I've talked to, people do want more interesting, unique content that only this sort of device can deliver.
Yeah. On the topic of media, one thing that surprised me is I just don't take advantage of all these cool photos features.
Hmm.
I haven't shot many 3D videos. I shot a bunch of panoramics and I look at them, but I just haven't used the kind of video view, or I'm sorry, photo viewing experience in this thing like I thought I would. I don't really have a complaint with it. I just don't find myself going to that when I put it on.
Interesting. See, for me, I absolutely love the photo experiences, and not just the panoramas where you can make them really big. Although a funny aside is that feature's not very smart. I think it's basically looking at the aspect ratio of an image. So
Yeah.
in my panorama folder and photos on Vision OS, I have a lot of things like St. Jude assets because we make these like really horizontal banners for places on the Relay
Yeah.
website. It's like, why is that in there? Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for pictures from the top of a mountain and I get, marketing assets. That's kind of funny. But I really do like the photo stuff. I like looking through the memories and just looking through my library, making it really big. And yeah, so that has stuck for me. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I don't dislike it. I think maybe because I use the thing so much for work, I just don't think about it to go in and just watch videos.
Yeah.
Either way, that's the thing. I On the panoramic topic, I went and took a bunch of panoramics around Disneyland because I just thought that would be cool. And what I found is they look good, but what I'd like to do is see Apple use some of their AI sauce to clean those up and turn those into environments. I think you could probably do it. It wouldn't be as good as the ones they've rendered in, but I think that would be a cool option, like
Yeah.
to set up like the Millennium Falcon picture and feel like I'm there as an environment. But early days, I get it.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, or maybe you have a property that needs overhauled, you can stand out with Squarespace, building a beautiful website, engaging with your audience, and selling anything: products, services, and even content. Squarespace has everything you need, all in one place, all on your terms. Their Blueprint AI and SEO tools make it really easy to get started. You can start with a completely personalized website with their new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint. Choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up, tailored to your brand or business and optimized for every device. And then easily launch your website and get discovered quickly with integrated and optimized SEO tools, so you show up more often to more people and grow the way that you want. One of my favorite things is that those SEO tools also are extended to your email campaigns. You can make outreach automatic with email marketing tools that engage your community, drive sales, and simplify audience management. Introduce your brand or business to unlimited new subscribers with flexible email templates, then create custom segments to send targeted campaigns. I love building on Squarespace, and I think you will too. If you have a project that is new or one that really needs some new attention, Squarespace is the best place to start. Head on over to squarespace.com/MPU and you can sign up for a free trial and you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/MPU with a 10% discount off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of MPU and all of Relay FM.
Another topic we were thinking about was communication and education. On the communication front, spatial personas and FaceTime calls. Are you using that much?
I am. Yeah, I've been on several regular FaceTime calls and the spatial persona deal where you're in 3D, and now like the person you're talking to can be in front of you, or if you're watching something together and share play, they move next to you. That experience really is impactful, and it does feel like you've got much more connection than a FaceTime call. Like even on the Mac, where you can make somebody, kind of life sized. There's something about it. Yeah, the spatial personas still look a little goofy, and like Mike Hurley's mouth doesn't move because his beard gets in the way. It's very upsetting to watch him talk
Yeah.
in Vision OS. But there is something about it that is personal and like intimate in a way that two-dimensional FaceTime just isn't. Now you got to, you're limited to talking to your friends who also have Vision Pros. I would love, like, if you're in charge of Apple for a day, one thing I would float is let spatial FaceTime at least capture work from other devices. So like if I'm speaking to somebody and they're in front of a studio display, why can't the studio display have two cameras? And like they won't, the 3D effect won't be the same for them because they're looking at a regular panel, like a display panel. But I, as a Vision OS user, could maybe see them in 3D. Like maybe there could be more to that. But the spatial FaceTime stuff is really pretty powerful, I think.
Yeah. I think people thought about it kind of like a joke at the beginning, but very quickly it just becomes a way to work. And I don't use it a lot because I don't have cause for it a lot. I mean, to me, the Vision Pro, more than anything else, is my Yosemite writing environment. So it's a solitary thing, or watching movies, And so I just don't think to use the FaceTime in there very often. But the times I've used it, it has not felt like a joke. It's always felt, like a legit way to communicate, and I think that's a good thing. It's going to need to get more penetration, and there's going to need to be a lot more of these out in the world before I think it becomes normal. But I think they're doing the right thing. I was critical at first, saying that they should have instead made like emoji people, but no, I think they did it right. They're able to get close enough that this is believable, and it's definitely more emotive than a cartoon.
Yeah, I've had that similar thought, that like we got the Memoji stuff just right there, but now I see what they were going for, and it definitely puts this product in contrast to something like the Meta Quest, where though it's much more avatar based in some of those other systems. I think Apple wanted to stand alone from that, and I'll give them credit. I mean, the personas have gotten better with every update. Now you're remaking them after a lot of updates, like they're recapturing them, I guess doing better processing, but they were pretty rough in the 1.0, but I really feel like they've come a startling way in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I'm a fan. And then, another topic here, we call it education, but there's a bunch of apps here. It kind of reminds me of the early days of CD-ROMs, right? Like, here's this thing where we can put a bunch of data in your computer. So there were planetariums and art galleries, and now we get the same kind of flock of apps in virtual space with this high resolution screens on the Vision Pro.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm a sucker for all of them. I think I've got just about all of them. I do like to sit here and look through the art galleries. My daughter teaches art history. I look at them and then I talk to her about paintings I've seen in there. The space stuff always gets me, and they've got a bunch of different apps that show you visual representations of the solar system or the galaxy, and then they've got 3D models of the spacecraft. All that stuff is like it's just a time suck for me that I love. I'll go in there sometimes and just get lost in one of those apps. They're all good. I really don't even. I mean, Art Universe stands out for me for art, but all of them are fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and I'm the same way. Like I am definitely a sucker for, hey, let me take this thing out in the world and put it on the floor of my office, and I can look around it and learn about it. And having played with a bunch of them, one that jumps out for me is Jig Space, and they do other AR stuff. Like they're a pretty big platform. And like in preparation for this, I went back in there, and there was some new material in there. They're adding things to it, And I spent, I don't know how much time learning about the, like if you have a baby, like the baby bed, like, you know, with the heat and they've got oxygen and stuff, like the baby needs help breathing, like all this like medical stuff. I'm like, I, I'm never going to need to know any of this stuff,
Yeah.
but it was so well done. And I can like click through it and it comes apart and you see how it works. It's all fascinating. And I really wanted to highlight it because, like, right now it's like, yeah, I'm just like kind of learning about nerdy stuff, but you could see a future where these things are much, much more universal. Like, it's a great way to learn about how something works and how it goes together. And even like 10 years ago with the Microsoft HoloLens, that was a push Microsoft was making. Like, hey, let's put these things in industrial environments. Let's put them, you know, in the hands of people who are building things at factory lines or are working in the field, and they can look at something and it explains how it comes apart and the process procedure is there. Like, I think all that stuff's really powerful, from like the classroom, like this is what the solar system looks like, all the way up through, hey, I'm repairing a car, you know, how do I get the alternator out? And it shows you step by step what you have to do. I think all that's really, really interesting. Right now, it's mostly like I'm just learning kind of fun things, but I really see a future in that could come to pass.
Absolutely agree. And that is one of the things about this that I didn't realize how much I would enjoy until I got into the apps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think this is one where third parties have delivered the goods. I mean, there's a lot of interesting apps coming out for this stuff, and they are providing this content. But you know, it's the immersive video stuff that you know Apple needs to pick it up.
Mm-hmm. What about gaming?
You know, I actually do enjoy some gaming on it. It's a very strange gaming platform. I mean, because it's a little more simplistic because it has to render it out in the world like that. One that I really like is a silly one called Bomba Room. Bomba Room. And honestly, if you guys have a Vision Pro, you're listening to this, you should download this game, because what it does is I use it in the studio where I've got this big floor, but you could put it on a table too. But it just looks for any flat surface. And it puts a little cannon in front of you. And then on the other side of the room, it puts like a castle or a bridge or something that you need to bomb, you know? And then you know, it's the usual mechanic. You set the direction, the height of the cannon and the power of the cannonball. And then you start firing away, and it leaves like divots where the cannonballs land when you miss. So you start to see like the table or the floor in the other side of the room starts to get peppered, you know, over time. The controls aren't perfect. I think the actual touch controls are too close to each other. So like sometimes you're trying to adjust something and you actually hit the pause button or whatever. Or in worst cases, sometimes you actually hit the trigger button for the cannonball when you were trying to do something else. But so I feel like they could adjust it a bit. But I've played this for hours now, and I'm at the point where the you know, the thing at the other side of the room is very exotic. There's ships and turrets, and they're firing back at me, and it's like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on now when I play the game as you get the more advanced levels. But that's actually kind of, it's a weird type of game that I've never had before, and it fits really well with this platform.
Yeah, I had not come across this, and so you told me about it in preparation for this, and I downloaded it, and I was just like laughing out loud in my office because
Yeah, right?
it's and for me, it not only because like it is so much fun, like the animation and stuff is great, but as a kid, my brother and I would build like forts out of like the Lincoln Logs, like the wooden toys, and like use marbles to blow
Exactly.
them up. It's like, oh,
Yes.
this is that. Like it was so
Yeah,
great.
it really ties into some like early childhood stuff here. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
yeah,
was
I did
awesome.
the same thing. Legos, Lincoln Logs, whatever it was,
Yep.
I found a way to destroy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another one for me that taps into that same sort of level of joy is Game Room. And this is on Apple
Yeah.
Arcade. And it is a bunch of kind of classic tabletop games that you're playing them in AR, and you play them with somebody else. So like I played a game of Battleship several weeks ago with Jason Snell, and we're across from each other, and like we're talking, and the board is just in front of us, and like you have little missiles that go over, and like fire comes out when it hits the ship, or a splash of water. And at one point, like he just like gets up and like tries to look over the board, like your little sibling would do trying to cheat.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, this is that, but I'm playing with my friend who lives, across the country. Like that is a really cool one. And if you have Apple Arcade, like it's just in there, like go check it out. I think both of these do a really good job at mixing the digital and the real world. And like the fully immersive games are also really interesting and look really good. But sort of the promise of AR is like, well, this thing exists in my actual space. And I think both of those do a pretty good job at that.
yeah, exactly. The interactive stuff is where it really gets great. And another one that I've been playing with, a new one, is called Demeo, Demeo, and it's like a dungeon crawler, but they made it for Vision Pro, and it's a mix of like reality stuff in your room plus kind of like a traditional screen. I'm not sure yet about this one, but it actually is. There is some effort here to make it work on Vision Pro, and I feel like this might be a nice kind of like look at some of the future stuff we can do. I don't know. I feel like game developers are starting to figure it out. But again, there's not enough people on the platform to justify people spending a ton of money on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one we've got on our list here that I don't know if we call this media or a game, but the Marvel What If application.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty cool. I've been through a good bit of it now, and yeah, it's somewhere between a movie and a game. Like you're interacting with it. The characters like turn and look right at you. The graphics are really fun in this. Like I love the style of them. And again, like part of it is fully immersive, but then other parts it's like happening in your space. It's a good mix of kind of everything I feel like the Vision Pro can do.
Yeah. But, it's coming from Disney. Apple should be making stuff like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, this is like an exclamation point on Apple not getting enough new content out. It's like, oh yeah, Marvel can do it, but Apple isn't.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, get on this.
And sure, like the Marvel IP is immense, but Apple has a lot of IP as well. Like think about all the sci-fi shows alone that they're doing. Like,
yeah,
if I could go explore the silo, or I could, be in the world of Foundations, like both of those shows really interesting visually. It would be so cool to be in them, and they haven't been able to, or haven't for whatever reason done that yet.
All right, quick sidebar. Should I watch Silo?
Yes, it's really good.
Okay, I haven't yet, so
it's good.
Maybe that'll be the next one.
It's good.
Well, things are not standing still. At WWDC, Apple announced Vision OS 2. Feels a little bit about like a 1.5,
yes,
which in fairness, it's only been a few months, so they haven't had a full year to develop it, and I'll give them a pass on that. But it is an improvement, and the first thing is it's just, we talked about this on our beta show, but it's more stable. I mean, just every time I use Vision Pro since I installed the beta, I just can't get over how much more like it feels snappier.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they, whatever they did, they tuned up the cylinders and they lubricated the engine or whatever. It all runs a little better now to me.
Yeah, it does. That has been very impressive to me. Feature wise, there's not a ton, but again, like I think that's okay because the thing hasn't been out very long, and a lot of what is in here is kind of building what we already had. Like there are some new gestures we can talk about, but in terms of features, right, it doesn't add anything widely new, but it improves. So like photos, for instance, the app is redesigned a little bit, and now it can create spatial photos from 2D images. And in my experience in playing with this, it does quite a good job. Modern iPhones are taking sort of uh, the depth information kind of all the time now, and
Yeah.
and the line between what's a photo and a portrait photo has been blurred. That wasn't a joke, but I stumbled
Yeah.
into it. And they're building on that in this, and some of them are really incredible looking. And you can now do share play in photos. So if you had someone else and you wanted to look through your photo library or through memories, you can do that together, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. In terms of the gestures, you got the palm up for the apps and then palm down for control center. I would like to. I'm betting there are a lot more gestures Apple has up its sleeve, and they're just not going to give them to us yet.
I think they've got to trickle them out or it'd be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the new ones are good, in particular the one to get to control center, because you kind of had to like look up into the sky, like, control center, where are you? Please come down. And now you can just turn your hand over and it's there.
Rearranging the home view is important, but
Yes.
it's tedious even as implemented in version 2.
It is.
I'd like to see that get better.
Yeah. David and I had a funny moment at WWDC when they showed that. I was like, oh, Widget Smith won't be on the last screen anymore. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Because it was Apple's kind of, it was like the first iPhone. Like Apple set the initial batch, and then after that they were alphabetical, and in a way that kind of made the mental load light. It's like, oh, well, like I'm looking for one that starts with S. I kind of know where that is, but people want to customize that. I've already moved mine around, and you can also pull iPad apps out of their penalty box. Like it was just a compatible apps folder, and those can be out on the home screen or the home view, I think as they call it. And that's good too. So like, yes, I'm glad that's there. And it is a little bit tedious. You know that thing on, if you're rearranging apps on your iPhone or iPad and like one like accidentally shoots to the next screen, be prepared for that in 3D space because that's still a thing.
Yeah, I feel like that it really is almost like a digression. It's gotten easier on the other platforms, but this one started back at step 1. They promised a bigger virtual Mac screen driven by the Mac. Basically, the example they gave at WWDC was 2 4K monitors next to each other. We have yet to see that in the beta, so let's see how that comes out. But one of the questions I want to ask you, Stephen, there's a lot of people listening to the show, international audience, and it's starting to show up in their countries now, the Vision Pro. Would you buy it again? I guess in 2 contexts. Would you buy it again as Stephen Hackett of Relay FM, or would you buy it just as an Apple enthusiast?
I think Stephen Hackett, the writer and podcaster, yes. I think as an individual, I'm not sure. I really try to be analytical about my use case, because we've known we were going to do this episode for a while now, and kind of just like my informal tally of like, okay, I'm picking this thing up. What's the impetus for that? More often than not, it's work related. It is not super often I'm picking it up just to watch a movie for my own enjoyment. It's more, I'm going to try something so I can talk about it on a show or write about it. And, that's kind of is what it is.
It's fair. That's fair. I would buy it again as an enthusiast. I use it enough for actual work, and I really enjoy watching movies on it. It's a lot of money, but I have spent more money on dumber things in my life. And I do like kind of being at the cutting edge of this stuff, even if I wasn't making podcasts and stuff about it. I'm enthusiastic about this stuff, and I want to play with it, and I have found enough use cases for it. But I definitely think I'm on the outlier end of this. I think there's a lot of people for whom going in the store and doing the demo is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And just enough to see how it works, and then hold on to your money and wait 3 or 4 years to see what they do.
Yeah. And I would definitely say to our listeners who this is now coming to your country for the first time, if it's feasible, do the demo in the Apple Store, because it really does show what this thing is capable of, and it gives you an idea of the physicality and stuff in a way that this is a very hard product to talk about, because so much about this product is how it feels, and that's different than talking about a new MacBook Air in a way. Like, it's just
Yeah.
fundamentally different. And so I would definitely say, if this is coming to your country, or if you're in the States and you haven't done a demo yet, I would book one next time you're around an Apple Store, because sitting there for a few minutes and kind of getting to experience it really, really puts, I think, all this into a context for people that is, it's hard to get to otherwise.
Yeah, totally agree. Although also be warned that in some ways is as good as it gets. So don't get sucked into the reality distortion field.
That's a good point. Yes, it is a literal sizzle reel. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
But I mean, and this is where the content problem kicks in, because what I would love to say is, oh yeah, but you can also get a 1 hour movie about those elephants that you see or whatever, you bump into in the video. And it's just not, the stuff isn't there yet. I mean, I think it'd be a lot easier to say, get one if they had the content to back up the sizzle reel, but they really don't.
Yeah.
But I did mention a minute ago, hold on to your money for a few years. What do you think the future is for Vision Pro? Is this just a hobby for Apple? Or are they taking it serious? What's going to be next?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I feel like on one hand, Apple doesn't launch a new platform lightly, but at the same time, there's part of me that thinks like this is a much harder sell than anything they've done before, because it is so different, and it is. And we haven't really talked about this, but in a way, it is a very isolating product, and you're using it on your own.
Yeah.
You're not having shared experiences unless it's over something like SharePlay, and that's not even shared in real life. That's all very complicated and tricky. I do think Apple cares about it, but I wish they would show it a bit more, I think, is kind of where I where I land on that.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this first version is them planting a flag that, yeah, we care about this and this is something we want to be involved with. But I don't think it's fully ready for prime time, or at least they're not treating it as if it is. Before initially released, there was a lot of insider information about these displays, because they have the best displays of any unit like this, like available to consumers. But there was a limited number of them that could be made. So like this isn't like an iPhone where they can make 1 billion units. And they've known that. I think that did partly affect their content strategy and their overall view of this. Like, they're not going to market it that hard, because if they make 2 million people want to buy it, but they can only make 1 million of them, then, what's the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of makes it a little weird for this first version, but I definitely think that they have a bigger play for this in mind, and they're kind of just getting started. As much as I whine about content, I think they have a much bigger plan. But I, as a Generation 1 adopter and someone who gave them my hard-earned dollars, I don't think they're doing great with content for me, and I feel like they should do better at that. But at the same time, getting down the road, this thing gets cheaper, better, lighter, all the above, right? And the apps mature more. I think this is something they absolutely want to see develop into the future. Like when it first came out, you and I talked on the show. I feel like there's like a dual track here. There's like the environmental one that puts you, in virtual space, but there's also the one that fits into a pair of glasses and you wear around as an augmented reality device. And I think Apple wants to pursue both of those things in the long term, and they got to start somewhere. So this is it.
Mm-hmm. And I think you can look at WWDC and see how much of the conference was really dedicated to Vision OS. There's a lot of sessions about it. There's a lot of new API and framework work that has gone into Vision OS 2 for developers to bring their apps over. And so they're definitely not sitting still, even if it's uneven, I guess is what I would say. So
Yeah.
the developer story continues to get better. Content stuff is still lagging behind. And we don't really know the true sales numbers. I mean, I was just sitting here with my phone, like I can get one today. You know,
Yeah.
we going into it, people thought, oh, it's going to be a 6-month wait. Now they're either making more than they planned, or that reporting was wrong, or they're not selling as well. Maybe it's all of that, mixed together somehow.
Yeah.
They're definitely out there and available to get, but I look no further than, like I said, WWDC to think, okay, Apple is taking this seriously. Like, people who are working on this stuff are pushing it forward, and they're trying to make it more impactful, and that's all very promising to me.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I don't regret buying the first generation. I think it will get a lot better, and we'll laugh about it that we spent this money on this thing in 10 years. But I'm also enjoying it. I overall, I'm glad I own this thing. I enjoy wearing it. I'll be working on it later day. I've got a project I want to work on, and that there's I guess I can say there's a Vision Pro size hole in my heart. All right. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. That's where you can sign up for more power users. We'd love to have you join, help support the show, and we get to bring you the ad-free extended version of the show. Thanks to this week's sponsor, Squarespace, and we'll see you next time.